from the victims' families on that as well. But joining me right now, former federal prosecutor Tony Brass. And Tony, we were talking earlier, and we were thinking one of the two, if not both, would be found guilty. Are you surprised by this verdict?
I am. I'm very surprised by the verdict. I think that the view of this case was that even though the defense wanted to cast blame onto Oakland City agencies for not having done their job, that there would be enough blame to go around for both Mr. Almena and Harris to be convicted.
And does that mean that that won't come up later? I mean, obviously there are some big questions here as far as the hung jury. Prosecutors are going to have to make some decisions here first, right?
They will, but it's almost impossible to see that we will ever look at Ghost Ship as an accident. This tragedy is of such magnitude that someone's going to have to be to blame for this. And if it's not Mr. Harris and Almena, then I think the city of Oakland is going to have issues with what happened. What was it they did or didn't do that constituted a real defense in this case? I mean, let's be honest, the public is going to be shocked, and this is going to surprise so many people, not least of all is the victims' families.
Well, I was just thinking about all those victims' families who have been there throughout this whole thing. First, they reached a plea deal, and the victims' family said, wait a minute, this doesn't seem right. That was thrown out. Now they've been there through the days of the trial, the jurors who were replaced. They've been through an awful lot, especially considering the loss of their loved ones.
There is little question that the focus to get justice for these victims' families was Mr. Almena and Harris and this trial. And so the fact that it's panned out with an acquittal means, almost by definition, that there's blame that's going to be cast somewhere else.
We are looking at the hallway here just outside of the courtroom, and Max Harris's attorney, Curtis Briggs, has come out. He was the one who told us that his client was acquitted, found not guilty on all 36 counts, 36 charges. He has said he is not going to be speaking to the media in public at all. And why is that?
Well, right now, his client has been acquitted, but the co-defendant hangs in the balance. What sort of offer the district attorney will make, what sort of plea deal a judge may approve later on, and what is the fate of Mr. Almena at this point really hangs in a very delicate balance. So making any comment now to the press is unnecessary and unproductive.
Just a quick little side note, because I have a question. We're looking at, obviously we're planning on having people come to the podium and speak, but we know what the verdicts are. We know what the jury, the decision they reached, yet they're not out. No one's come out of the courtroom except the one attorney. What's going on inside there?
Well, it's possible that that Mr. Serra is speaking with the jury. He's going to want to know a lot of things. What their approach was with Mr. Harris's case, and also what happened with that jury misconduct. What was it that led to 3 jurors being dismissed and beginning deliberations all over again?
And we still don't know what that misconduct was. There's no details. They're not speaking. The court isn't talking about that.
We know nothing. I would be speculating, but it is likely that what that was some sort of information got to those 3 jurors, which would have polluted the deliberation process. Whether someone asked them a question or gave them a piece of information that they weren't allowed to consider as jurors.
Or talking amongst themselves, which they're instructed not to do outside of the deliberation room.
Entirely possible. But no matter what happened, it was seen that it was dangerous enough to the process that they had to be dismissed.
I was mentioning earlier the victims' family members having gone through so much, and part of it was that last summer prosecutors did reach a plea deal with both defendants. It was sort of a package deal, and those family members really strongly objected to that. They thought it was too lenient, and then another judge threw it out, tossed it out, and said, you're right, we're going to trial. How unusual is that in your experiences?
Highly unusual.
Really?
It's not infrequent that a victim will feel that a plea bargain isn't harsh enough, but for a judge to agree and actually take action like that and throw out a plea bargain in a high-profile case like this is very unusual.
Because as we look at the pictures here of some of the victims who died in that fire so tragically in early December of 2016, when we see what happened there, the public sees it, the victims' family members obviously have to relive this. It can't be dismissed as just an accident, is what you were telling me earlier, that something happened here and someone must be responsible somewhere down the road.
This was a conspicuous danger. Anyone who walked into this place could see how dangerous it was. And so it is a mystery how it got this far, where there was an actual party hosting all of these people who died in this horrific inferno in this building. Like, how did that happen without somebody saying, we got to shut this building down? This cannot exist. We must take steps.
The prosecutors, and I'm going to ask you to, Monday morning quarterback here, but something went wrong here. They didn't prove their case. And it has to be asked down the road. I'm sure they're going to be second guessing themselves too, is what happened? What did we not do right?
I have to think that when the defense in this case shifted blame away from their clients onto city agencies, there was enough there that the jury concluded that somebody else in a position of authority should have done something. Now, it's hard to think that the blame shift was so effective that it took blame completely off of Almena and Harris, at least as an outsider.
Okay, Tony, I'm going to interrupt you there because let's get to Da Lin. He has now made his way out of the courtroom. He's in front of the camera in the hallway. Da, I want to first of all know, what was the reaction in that courtroom?
Oh my gosh, a lot of crying, a lot of sobbing, especially from the victims' families. When the jury, when the court workers announced not guilty, you can hear the gasp coming from the family. You can hear, I saw a lot of families crying, and you can see the pain in their face. And also, when Almena's information was released, so for Almena, it was a hung jury. They could not come to an agreement for Derick Almena. He is the master tenant. The judge declared it hopelessly deadlocked. So here's the very important information. Out of the 12 jurors, 10 found Almena guilty. 2 found Derick Almena not guilty. Of course, as we all know, you need all 12 to have the same decision, to have some kind of either guilty or not guilty. In this case, it was a hung jury. Again, 10 found Almena guilty, 2 not guilty. So here's what's next. On October 4th, the prosecution will come back. They can either retry the case, they can also negotiate some sort of plea deal with the defense attorney to have some kind of settlement. Now, keep in mind, before this trial, there was some kind of deal that both sides had agreed to, but the family members, the victims' family members, did not want to take that deal. They thought it was too easy on Max Harris and Derick Almena. They rejected that deal, and that prompted the judge, a judge, to throw out that deal, and that led to this criminal trial. And now, of course, Max Harris not guilty on all 36 counts and hung jury on Derick Almena. As for Max Harris, that was not a big surprise because the prosecution did not focus their case on Max Harris. Their main focus was on Derick Almena. So it wasn't a big surprise. A lot of the family members I talked to quite a few family members. A lot of the family members obviously wanted Max Harris found guilty, but some of the family members thought he was a scapegoat. Some of the victims' family members thought they were okay with letting him go and not guilty. And obviously he was released immediately after that announcement was made. So I understand he is in the process of being freed right now. They have to go through some procedure, basically. As for Derick Almena, we understand that he may continue to be locked up and wait for that October 4th decision. We are standing here in the hallway waiting for the defense attorneys for Derick Almena to come to speak. We're also waiting to see if victims' family members, if they want to speak or not. But I can tell you, just a lot of sad faces, a lot of disappointment. You can see the pain. It's hard to watch when family members lost family members and they truly feel that someone is responsible, yet they feel helpless in the sense that they cannot hold these people accountable in their minds, that they cannot hold the folks accountable. So it was very difficult. We have not had any indication whether the family members will talk or not. In the past, some were vocal. They wanted to express their opinion, so we'll see what happens. But we're keeping an eye. So this is the hallway where typically they would come down through the elevator and they would come down to the hallway. So it looks like the this is Max Harris, defense attorney. So we are going to try to walk over and see if they can talk here. On the mic here, before they talk, this is Curtis Brick. He is the attorney for Max Harris. We'll listen in.
Tyler Smith, attorney for Max Harris.
James Morgana, attorney for Max Harris.
Michael Seville, attorney for Max Harris. Before I begin my statement, I'd like to have a moment of silence and acknowledgement for the victims of the Ghost Ship Fire tragedy and the families who are undoubtedly going through a difficult time, regardless of where we stood and as far as Max Harris's involvement in that. Our hearts really have gone out for them. We know this has not been an easy process, and we certainly keep them in our prayers. This isn't a time for us to talk about the 2 years that my innocent young client has spent in jail. I think this is a time to thank the community, thank all of the community for their tremendous outpouring of support for Max Harris throughout this process. We want to thank the jury, even the jurors that didn't continue to deliberate along with everybody else. Everybody quite heroically put their lives on hold, worked diligently to come to a verdict, and we are eternally grateful for the verdict they came to for Max Harris. Obviously, there's a lot of people to thank. There's at least 24 people that volunteered on our legal team to help. Too many names to mention, but Alameda County Public Defender's Office, San Francisco County Public Defender's Office are two organizations that we owe a tremendous debt to as well for their assistance. Finally, we want to call on the City of Oakland and Alameda County to use this as an opportunity to clean house, to become accountable, to recognize the tremendous duty they have to the citizens of these communities to do their job, to do it well, to protect, to serve, to be accountable, and to have the courage that when something goes wrong to step forward and say, you know what, we made a mistake, even if there are 36 people who died. The community needs that from the City of Oakland. The community cannot be safe until we get accountable leadership in the city and in the county. And that's been not the biggest tragedy, but next to the loss of lives and the tremendous impact on everybody who lost loved ones, that's been the biggest tragedy here, is not one Oakland city official has stepped forward and said, this is how we're going to fix it. This is how we're going to make this community better. This is what we did wrong. Not one city official had the courage to get up on the witness stand and tell the truth. You know, it was just very, very sad. And this isn't a time to celebrate for Max Harris because this community's sick. This community's sick because the leadership is sick. And we need reform. And we need a change. And that's our challenge to the leaders here in this city. If you care about the city, you have pride and integrity, then do something and be honest about it.
Max spent 2.5 years behind bars. What's next for him? How does he get his life back together after all this?
It's going to start with a nice vegan meal that's not served by Santa Rita Jail, and then we'll take it from there. I can't answer that.
Once he found out the verdict, what were his first responses or reactions?
He tried to stop me from crying, and he was emotional, and we were all emotional, and we didn't really say much. First, I want to say I'm sorry. As somebody who's lost a child, I understand the pain, and I know that they likely will never be able to find peace with what happened, and that I apologize that if anything that we did inflamed them. I was always under the belief that Max Harris was innocent, and I did what I had to do to get him home, and our hearts are with those families and everybody who's been victimized by this tragedy. I'm going to turn this over to my co-counsel, Tyler Smith, to make a statement.
You know, none of this ever would have happened in the first place if the income inequality, the injustice with respect to the income inequality and the housing crisis weren't as bad, wasn't permitted to get as bad as it has gotten in the Bay Area and in Oakland in the last few years. These artists were living in this warehouse because they didn't have too many other options. They were going to be on the street otherwise. They were living there, in essence, out of necessity. And there were many other warehouses in Oakland very similar as the Ghost Ship warehouse. And the reason they're there is because of the housing crisis that we're facing. So I hope that the Oakland City, that the leaders of the City of Oakland, Mayor Schaaf, and others take real, measurable steps to address this issue first and foremost. So I echo my colleagues' comments that change and reform really needs to happen. With that said, we're incredibly sorrowful. We always have been very sorrowful for the families. It's an incredible loss that they suffered. This is something that, you know, we've been a little bit hamstrung from saying to the media while the trial was going on, while the jury was deliberating. But now that they've reached a verdict, we can really let them know how truly sorry and sad for them that we are. Max is incredibly sorry and sad for them. He's always expressed his remorse, his wish that he could have done something different to save someone that died that night. We're incredibly grateful to all the members of the jury, all of the alternates, every juror that sat there through these 6 months was incredibly gracious to give all of their time and undivided attention, and it took a lot of hard work for them to get to this. But you know, they listened to all of the evidence very carefully, so I really commend all of them. They did a fantastic job, and we're very grateful that they were able to come to the not guilty verdict.
What happens with Max next? Is he going to be released? When? What are the next steps for him?
We don't have any details of that, and we're not at liberty to discuss that. We just speculate.
So is it the plan now? I understand he is releasing.
Yeah. Immediately in a bureaucratic sense, and we don't know what that means. So we don't know when he's going to be released, and we don't know where he's going to be released from. So we don't want to make too many comments regarding that. We'd be speculating at this point.
You don't anticipate he'll be out today?
I expect he'll be out today, but I just don't, we can't get any answers. The Sheriff's Department is inevitably responsible for releasing him, so you'd have to direct your questions to them. Almost 2.5 years. Yeah. It was 6 months after the fire, so it was about May or June. James Morgana's going to make a statement.
It's been an honor fighting for an innocent, brilliant artist who never should have been charged in the first place, who had seemingly unlimited amounts of government resources and a government machine geared towards proving his guilt, despite all of the facts showing his innocence, and doing so to pursue their own political agenda. And I would also just like to echo the statements of my colleagues regarding the enormous amount of support that Max Harris had from family and from friends and people who became aware of the injustice of him being charged in the first place, and who voiced their concerns and voiced their support. They have made a concrete difference in the case by keeping Max Harris hopeful, knowing that he's being supported and that he has a great support group.
We have been listening to the attorneys for Max Harris. Max Harris was acquitted on all charges today in the Ghost Ship warehouse trial. Let's go outside the courthouse now for another news conference.
The fact that 36 families were shattered, the fact that there was the most unspeakable loss of life. And so, while he's happy, in a sense, to be unconvicted, he's very unhappy when he thinks about what happened and the fact that that can never be repaired. And I join him in those sentiments. For me, the overwhelming aspect of this case was always the loss of life and the heartbreak that these families suffered. And I never thought that the trial should have been held against Derick, because I didn't feel in my heart that he was responsible for it any more than a lot of other people were responsible for it. And there was... Who was responsible? Who's responsible for it are the people governing a society where we are in one of the richest areas in the nation, and you step over bodies every time you cross the street, and people are starving, and there's mentally ill everywhere, and these people like Derick take a warehouse and get people out of the gutter and put a roof over their head and don't have the money to furnish it according to the laws of Oakland, and that's why this happened. So in my view, there is a moral imperative here that's a reflection of society as a whole, where we are turning our back on the neediest who are all around us, particularly right here in Oakland.
Brian, why do you believe that Max Harris was acquitted on all counts and Derick Almena, a hung jury here?
I don't know that the disparity of the evidence was so great between one or the other, but I can only tell you, I think Max Harris is a well-meaning, wonderful individual. I just spent the last 6 months with him sitting at council table, and he is one of the most sensitive, thoughtful people I have ever met. And I don't know the answer, but I do know that he deserved what he got from this verdict.
What is next for Derick Almena?
We return on October 4th for a trial date setting.
When you talk about the loss of life, and you're clearly distraught about it yourself, should Derick Almena be held responsible for that? Many of the families believe he should.
I understand that completely, and I think in a moral sense he is responsible, but whether legally he should be convicted of involuntary manslaughter, I don't know about that. He's not a criminal. He's not a criminal type. He never in his life has hurt anybody. He's never done anything wrong to anyone.
We're listening to Brian Getz, one of Derick Almena's attorneys. Let's shift back inside the courthouse now, back up to the hallway where one of the victim's family members is reacting.
That was the last text he sent out.
What's your
Alberto Vega.
And what's your age?
Alberto, Alberto, Vega, Vega.
What's your age?
I'm 36.
And you,
my least favorite number now.
Yeah. You mentioned that you had thrown parties before. Do you work in art industry?
I was in a band for a while, but I did shows at bars and stuff.
Yeah. So you had been to lots of other parties in the city. And
yeah. I've been to underground parties, and I've always felt pretty safe. But I mean, after the station fire, I was very aware of my surroundings. And
what about since this? I mean, have you gone to other events?
Yeah, but I really didn't feel good. I remember going to an event in April 2017, and I was kind of freaking out for a while, and I had to just really relax and tell myself I was safe. And I knew where the exits were. It was a legit venue, but I did go to one legit venue that I didn't like at all, and I really freaked out, and I kind of waited by the front door the whole time.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time.
We have been listening to one of the victims' family members there in the hallway outside of the courtroom. For those of you just joining us, a verdict returned today in the Ghost Ship warehouse fire trial. Derick Almena, who was the master tenant, as they called him, was it was resulting in a hung jury. 10 voted for guilty, 2 not guilty. It was Max Harris who was acquitted on all charges. We heard from their attorneys earlier today. And I want to bring in Tony Brass, former prosecutor for the U.S. government. And Tony, what we heard from both of the sets of defense attorneys was sort of, they were pointing out that the city and the county were to blame here. If anyone was to blame here, it was the officials who didn't do their job. And there's some pretty strong words from Max Harris's attorneys as to, they said the city is sick.
Certainly the gauntlet was thrown down. And there's no mystery about what the defense was in this case. They are shifting the blame completely to the city officials, and the people who inspect buildings and issue citations and are responsible for whether buildings are up to fire code or not. There's no doubt that they shifted the blame completely onto those government agencies.
And as far as how much blame might be there, that can come later. There might be civil trials. There might be other proceedings as well. Max Harris, Derick Almena has to be back in court in October 4th. There will be a decision as to what to do in terms of retrying him at that point.
He does. I'm surprised there wasn't more caution on the part of the attorneys for Mr. Harris, because Mr. Almena is still vulnerable to prosecution, and now the city has more public relations issues than ever and more of an interest in convicting Mr. Almena in a second trial. So, I don't know what effect that will have on the motivation behind trying Mr. Almena a second time. But my goodness, certainly there was very little room for anything other than anger on the part of Mr. Harris's lawyer. They really, really put it right to the city, right where it hurts.
And the 10-2 jury decision here, 10 voting for guilty and 2 not guilty. Prosecutors, when they have to look at how they might retry this, or whether they decide to reach another plea deal, if that's even possible, they have to consider all of this stuff. How does that 10-2 play out? There were 2 jurors who said, not guilty.
A 10-2 hang is actually good for the prosecution. Obviously not as good as 11-1, but a 10-2 is something that can be retried, and that retrial can be taken seriously. They have every reason to expect that they would be able to achieve a conviction. Now, there's also a strategic advantage. It sounds in this case like Mr. Almena and Harris have a certain loyalty between them, so I have no idea what the strategy will be there. But Mr. Almena now has someone else to shift the blame to. Mr. Harris won't be sitting next to him at a second trial. So there's yet one more person that blame could be shifted to if he wanted to. Now, again, I don't know what the relationship is between the 2 men and their attorneys and what the strategy is. But certainly, charging Mr. Harris was a good move to block Mr. Almena from being able to cast blame on him.
Okay, and I'm wondering whether prosecutors will try to get Mr. Harris to testify against Mr. Almena now that Mr. Harris has been acquitted.
It seems like that's a possibility, but I don't consider it likely.
Not likely.
Yeah, not given what we've seen today.
All right, more to come. Tony, thanks very much. Let's shift back now to the hallway outside of the courtroom. I believe Da Lin is back with us now. Da?
Yeah, Alan, and that's the big question, right? Will prosecution want to retrial this, as you guys are just talking about, 10-2? That's a close one, but not close enough, right? We understand that there were 2 that simply had made up their mind, in the sense that the judge asked, if we give you more time, will that make any changes? If we read back the testimony, will that make a difference? If we allow you to look at the evidence again, would that do anything? And the head of the jury said no. They are basically, as the judge said, hopelessly deadlocked. And perhaps a retrial could... Back to what Max Harris's attorney, Curtis Briggs, and Tyler Smith said. They continued on with their narrative, shifting that blame to the city, specifically firefighters and police officers. who actually visited that warehouse. Remember, there had been numerous occasions where firefighters, police officers went to that warehouse, and they did not shut it down. They did not kick the people out there who were living there onto the streets. There were parties, music parties. There was chest cam footage. Was illegal parties in the warehouse. And so that's what the defense captured, saying, look, you have the city, authorities, firefighters, police officers trained to see these things. They did not act saying that this was a bad environment. How would my clients know that this is a bad situation? And that's what they focused on. They also shifted the blame to the landlord, saying the landlord is at fault, that the landlord should have stopped this, the landlord should know better. And they also used another theory, saying that an arsonist perhaps could have started a fire, and in that case, it was not the fault of Derick Almena and Max Harris. So they threw all kinds of theories out there. As for the prosecution, I'll just look at my notes here. The prosecution was very firm, saying that, well, Derick Almena, the master tenant, he illegally converted a warehouse into living spaces. They said he also turned it into without having fire safety features. And so that seems the jury did not seem to buy that. Hang on one sec here. We have Mary Alexander. He is the attorney representing some of the victims' families. Let's see if she's going to talk. Okay, this is Mary Alexander. She is representing quite a few of the families, the victims' families in civil lawsuits. Let's listen in here. Mary, go ahead if you can start.
I am sure. So, I'm Mary Alexander. I am the lead counsel in the civil case, and we want to complete the circle of justice. The families are disappointed in the verdicts today, the results of today. We look forward to proving the case against the city of Oakland that failed the public, that failed the people who came into this building. The city knew, the police knew, the firemen knew that this place had people living in it, that they were using it like a cabaret, that there were events that were happening, and they failed to stop it and to protect the people. And as a result, these 36 beautiful young people died. As well as proving our case against the Ings, the owner of this building, that had the duty, the non-deliberable duty, they couldn't delegate it to Harris and Almena, the duty to make this a safe building so that the people could get out during the fire. And they didn't do it. They failed the public. And also against PG&E, who supply the electricity. There was testimony in this trial there was electrical cause to the fire, and that PG&E failed to make this building safe and provide the safety that was required by law. So we have trial in May, and we look forward to proving the case. Some of the family members feel the results today are because of the failure of the city and PG&E and the Ings and others to protect the public, and that's where the fault lies. Thank you very much.
All right, we have been listening here. Latest is Mary Alexander, the lead attorney in the civil case that is going to be coming up. Tony Brass, just one last comment. As you listen to all of this, I didn't realize there was a May date already set for these civil cases. They're going after PG&E and the city and the owner of the building. These are deep pockets. Mr. Almena and Harris do not have deep pockets. Now, I'm not suggesting in any way that that's what this case is really about. These families have shown us how heartfelt they are. They suffered real loss. And the victims in this case are people who would be at Mr. Harris's and Mr. Almena's building. So this is one community. So there's real heart in this. But the fact is that this does open the doors to negligence on the part of these deep pockets. So
I look forward to a seriously large verdict in the civil case.
36 lives lost. That's the bottom line.
There's no
Here's
money.
Some of the pictures of the. You can't. Right.
There's no money.
Absolutely. All right, Tony, thanks so much for being with us. Again, the breaking news this hour for you. An Oakland jury has acquitted defendant Max Harris. The jury was hung for Derick Almena, 10 voting for guilty and 2 for acquittal. We'll bring you live streaming coverage, reaction to the verdict live on KPIX.com. That will be all afternoon long. And of course, we'll have more on the verdict coming up on the KPIX 5 News at 5. Until then, we send you back to our regularly scheduled programming.
Navy, your sailors?
In the streets of LA,
these are bad guys that need to be stopped.
only one team
Federal agents! Gotta go save the world.
knows how to turn up the heat.
Well, we could be together. We could talk. They're asking if we could be together. It's just a logistical thing, though. I don't know if Dean can do it.
No, you just got to do the 2 mics. You got to use one mic.
One mic. All right. You just hold that mic and I'll stand. Yeah, we can do
We did it in the hallway at Steinle. We did this at Steinle.
Do you want that? Like a debrief with the two of us?
We did this at Steinle. We can do it.
Just ask him and I'll say. Especially when you almost know it. Hey, there's an audible.
Is Tony Sarah?
I was reading the notes. Can I ask you about, like, your impressions of the weight of the evidence? You know, that the difference between the evidence I had against Harris and the evidence I had against Almena?
They should stand by.
Yeah, I mean, that there was so much evidence.
Yes.
Yeah.
I started to talk about that already, but I also have a quote from Sarah about how the fire department.
Were we on air or were we just on the internet? Oh, okay. I think so.
Right. Okay.
Or maybe it was just
Hey, Melissa, thanks for bringing her down.
My observations there today.
Yeah, because I don't have anything for today.
I don't know. I'm hoping Tony Sarah could come down. We read that this morning was from the fireman who went in after that 2014.
Can you guys go shoulder to shoulder?
And I'll talk about the Pedro's.
Yes, because that's it.
I'll talk about that.
Pedro's is the fireman. It's George Lynn. And he made a
Stop moving back. Come back right on the X. There you go.
The fire load was pretty heavy there. But Almena, in his original testimony, told him nobody did that. And that was his testimony.
Yeah, he repeatedly said he didn't live there.
Yeah. But there was Freeland, and that was the last testimony.
Melissa, are we going live from the floor?
And then they also tell me that Leon's wrapping. You don't have anything, right?
No.
I'm already sorry. No, you're busy. Yeah, I just want to say hello.
Somebody was on our IFE frequency. Now it's clean. You want? You don't have another earpiece.
I do.
Stand by. Stand by.
Tony Sarah's outside? Alex, you might have to speak back there. Okay, Alex. Okay. Alex, we might have to go outside. Tony Sarah's outside. Tony Sarah's outside.
Well, actually, we both covered this trial pretty much from the beginning back in April, and we both have our observations about kind of how this went and perhaps and why it culminated the way it did today. I can say from my own experience that being in the courtroom this afternoon, it didn't seem like the family members were terribly surprised by the outcome. There were a couple of surprised, certainly when Max Harris is not guilty verdicts were being read. Very few people reacted at all, and I'm sure she's there, the family members of the victims. There were a couple of ladies who were crying, but they were honestly crying before the thing started. Once they got to Almena, though, I think their expectations might have been a bit different, and I could see
some sighs and moaning among the folks that it seemed that they were disappointed in the outcome, especially after the guilty was 10-2, and then the judge went on to say almost immediately after that she felt that the jury was hopelessly deadlocked. So at that point, people were clearly disappointed. Leslie, you've been there from day one also, and there was a big difference between the evidence that we saw and heard against Max Harris and that against Derick Almena.
Well, the question has always been, Almena signed lease. Almena went into it knowing that he was leasing a warehouse, but he was turning it into living quarters and a concert venue and an art gallery. Whereas Harris was always portrayed by his attorneys as basically a homeless guy who ended up in the Bay Area, found a place to live, surrounded by art, and that he basically decided to helping Almena out, and I think the jury must have felt some sympathy or some empathy for him in the position he was in, and he wasn't ever officially hired or even given security. Nail on him that title never really stuck. I think the families, they've been really ambivalent about it the whole time, certainly emotional about it the whole time. But they, like Curtis Riggs, the attorney for Max Harris, just told us he thinks they'll never find peace. This is going to be a difficult moment.
Well, and it's not over yet, as we've heard. I think now we're going to have to wait for the prosecution, the Alameda County District Attorney's Office, to decide whether they're going to want to retry Derick Almena. The judge set a hearing on that matter for October 4th, and you may recall, Larry and Kristen, that there was at one point a plea agreement in place in this case. I think Almena's attorneys are hoping that maybe they can begin negotiating another plea in this next month or so. That's it for now from us. We'll have much more for you this afternoon on ABC 7 News.
Nice job. Step one.
They're like 1 minute. It's really
Yeah, awesome.
They're in charge of wrapping me up.
Thanks, you guys.
I'm like, 30? So now what? I don't know.
I have more to say. I'm just looking
We
for
all have
notes
more
and
to say.
circling
It's just like,
things.
so they want
I mean, the arson stuff, that maybe it created doubt in the jury's mind that it was arson.
Yeah.
I don't think so. I just think it's mainly the pit roast and the fire department, but that takes 2-3 minutes to kind of tell that story.
This thing is not providing interference anymore. I don't know who's next.
Somebody left.
If somebody was on our frequency, yeah.
You have people outside, but there's only
Yeah,
one cord. There's only
There's only one cord provided with
That won't do
0.
any good. Outside. We must have
Why didn't he come to us?
Go again, Henry, go again. I'm sorry, he's on the Charlie Brown. What is it? Somebody's coming to talk. Tell
Hold on, hold on. Presser might be we see family members coming, but we don't know yet. Don't see a DA yet. But we might be starting maybe 3-5 minutes. I don't know. Nothing yet. Yes. Well, okay. There's no one coming yet. I don't see a DA yet. Stop it. Stop it.
Okay. 60 seconds.
60 seconds. 60 seconds to DA. 60 seconds to DA.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Are you good?
They're coming out.
Good afternoon. Thank you for your patience. I'm Teresa Drennick. I'm the spokesperson for the District Attorney's Office. And today we're going to hear from our Chief Assistant, Kevin Dunleavy. And I wanted to just say in advance that because of the mistrial that was declared, the case against Derick Almena remains an active prosecution, and therefore we are not able to take nor answer questions specific to the evidence or the details of the trial. So Chief Assistant Kevin Dunleavy.
Good afternoon. I'm Kevin Dunleavy. I'm the Chief Assistant of the Alameda County District Attorney's Office. I'm here today on behalf of District Attorney Nancy O'Malley, who, like you, have been patiently waiting for the jury as they have gone through their hard work of working on this case. Unfortunately, Nancy, in her responsibilities as the president of the California District Attorneys Association, is in Southern California, is unable to be here. So today I speak on behalf of District Attorney O'Malley and the entire District Attorney's Office and this team of fine professionals who tried this case. Today, of course, the jury did come back with not guilty verdicts against Max Harris. We respect the decision of the jury and the fact that they worked so hard over this length of time in which they were away from their families and their jobs as they took on their civic responsibilities of being trial jurors. Since the beginning of this case, our hearts have been with the families of the 36 victims that died in this unspeakable tragedy. That still remains our focus, and that will be our focus going forward. As we go forward, and we understand that the jury had a split verdict or a hung jury against Mr. Almena, we are going to evaluate the facts and the evidence that came out from this case. We're going to take into account discussions that any jurors may have had with our trial lawyers, and we will evaluate that and go forward. I think it is important for me to point out that there's been an incredible amount of hard work on behalf of these three prosecutors here Autry James, Casey Bates, and Stacy McCormick, and our team of investigators and victim witness advocates that continue to work with the families. As we go through the process and on this waiting for the verdict, this was extremely difficult for the family members to accept. But the verdict is in against Max Harris. We are going to evaluate our prosecution as we go forward against Derick Almena. And because it is a pending case, we really have no further things to say on the matter. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. And as I said, the trial prosecutors cannot take questions at this time. Thank you very much. We will be sending out a press release later today.
Do you wish you had taken the 6 years from Max?
So at this time, we're not going to answer further questions. Thank you very much. The next court date is set for October 4th for Mr. Almena, and that is a date for setting future court proceedings. Thank you.
Should I grab the stick mic up there?
Oh, just leave it there for the time being.
This is on.
Just the microphone. Just the microphone.
Huh?
Take it off. Yeah. Thanks. I always get this mixed up.
Frustrated, very upset. I'm more than upset. I'm beyond, because this wasn't supposed to happen.
What are your thoughts about Max Harris getting not guilty?
I'm mad. I'm just upset. My son and his girlfriend died, and is this in vain? I've been here like almost every day for over 5 months. For the jury to come back with this, it's frustrating. There's no other word for me to say. I'm just upset right now.
The defense of Max Harris said that maybe when Derick Almena is tried again, they should include the owners of the building in order not.
Oh, everybody's guilty. Everybody's guilty. Max is guilty. They didn't find him guilty. I don't know why. Max is guilty, just as Almena is. As the owner, as everybody else. I lost my son because of this. And this is what happens? No, I am not happy about this. Sorry.
That you've taken the plea deal?
No. They were going to get 3 months, 6 months, at all. Now I know. But at least he served 2.5 years. It's something. Doesn't matter. It's not going to bring my son back, though.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for being.
Can I get your name?
Mary Vega.
And your son was?
Alex Vega.
Thank you so much.
And
So
the
sorry
girlfriend?
Michaela Gregory.
So sorry.
Thank you.
What was her name?
Mary Vega.
And I still believe with Derick still being in jail and with a mistrial, we are still ignoring the root of the problem. We need to hold our landlords and building owners accountable, or this will happen again. We need to hold the people accountable who are profiting off of us taking shelter. And with Derick in jail right now, we are still ignoring that fact. I hope, as that being said, I believe that both Max and Derick are also victims of this, and I get to see some healing happen on some level. And I'm very excited for that, but my heart is still heavy today. So it's hard to find the words. It's honestly hard to find the words, and honestly, I don't even feel like my words are doing this justice right now. The pain that was involved with this tragedy, the beautiful, beautiful people that were lost from my community, I hope that someday we can find justice and that this will never happen again. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing is, a lot of things change too. I lost my home, so a lot of things change. What's next? It's hard to know. And we'll see how that goes. What's next? Healing. Like, that's all I can predict. Healing. I don't, some real food. The comfort and support of his friends, at any hour. I can't imagine the healing that he's going to have to go through. He lost 7 friends in one night. I've lost friends before. I've lost loved ones. I've lost family members. But my God, I've never been through anything like that before. So there's going to be a lot of healing that's going to happen now. So, yeah. Thank you guys for covering this too. Thank you for your dedication as well. I've been telling everybody, like I told Melissa, Twitter kept me sane this past week. As it looked like insane because I was sitting there refreshing it every 5 minutes. But thank you guys for all your reporting and dedication and everything, your support.
Too close to 4. We might have to go live there.
Before you have to. It's after that we can clear out, and that's what I'm going to pitch right now. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm going to pitch. I'm going to move my stuff over here.
How'd it go?
I was going to say short and sweet, but it's short. It's just short.
Been a long time, bro. How you been? Still around. You got balance? Physically, mentally, take care, man. All right, let's see next week. And I was hoping you knew. Sorry. Good luck. He knew when we were at Peterson trial.
move outside.
We sat for Walter. Zoom on, right? But he's not.
I don't have a photographer, so Laura and I are here and do our live hit or whatever we need to do and then move outside.
Doing the live shot.
I mean Laura.
Is this going to be Laura's mic? Yeah, we're going to go live before here. We're going to do one live shot here. Yeah, leave it on, please. Are you on live before? Oh, you're not. I don't think so. Leave it up for 12 minutes. You're awesome. I just totally sent an email about what we talked about just now with the split audio. In my frustration, I just sent it. Like, this is constructive, this is not critical. Are you still up? Who's ringing? 11, Dean. No. 11, yes. Yes, why? She's on the phone. Bye-bye.
My guard says the van is secure.
I love that. I love it. You got to look at it. And John Watson. It's the best shot ever. What was that about? They were trying to call me about you. This came in handy, huh? It's mine. That box is working now because that person, you don't have.
They need to get us, and they have to suggest this. There's, I have it for your plane. Plug in here, it has a, they need to get us this. That needs to be in our tool.
Yeah, because the new phones don't have it.
No. Yeah, it doesn't give you a backup.
There's no backup. Nice to have it.
I know, they always make everything obsolete.
Or they make a lightning plug for these things. They make a lightning plug for your iPhone. guys are going live, or is that? Wow. Pull it off every time. We'll do it.
You okay, yeah?
Yeah. Hey, Alex, I'm just going to take this down. I don't think we got any more done. We're about to be kicked out of the building. Yeah, we're doing our 4 o'clock and we're out. We're doing a 4 o'clock live shot.
That Derick Almena his future still hangs in the balance. We still don't know. There's going to be a court date coming up. We'll find out more about whether or not the prosecution wants to try Derick Almena all over again.
All right, so seam drill. Front of the snack bar.
And we'll just talk as long as they wrap it up.
You see these 36 victims, and they wanted accountability. They did not receive it today. It's hard not to feel right now. This tragedy, they created an advantage. They have built this grief. This is not the way they want things to end. We'll see some Max Harris for their defense team. It is a happy victim, so there's a lot of mixed emotions in this. But most importantly, we got to give credit to these who here in the Bay Area why not
Are you getting that too?
time and attention to their personal base.
It doesn't matter what side you guys want to be on. You do this side.
Which side would you like her to
She can come in from that side. That's cool. Which way do you want to turn to his
You know, I got to picture this. It's a small, packed courtroom. You got it on one side, every row filled with family members of these victims, mothers and fathers who lost their sons, and mothers and fathers who lost their sons and daughters. Sometimes, in some of those cases,
let's just try and not include the snapshot.
You know, they're basically one unit here. On the other side, we've got one row dedicated to the supporters of Max Harris. Micah Allison and Derek Allison, his wife, Derick Almena, did not see Derick Almena's three children there. But you've got to imagine there was just so much emotion packed in that tiny courtroom, and it ended in a way that not many of us expected.
6.
I'm leaving, guys.
I gotta show you this. Here, come here. Plug into this. Oh, you don't have a headphone. Here, no. Here, watch what happens.
Alex, I'm going to go out to the edit.
Put this on.
And I'll come back.
So you hear the static? So you hear the static? You hear the static? Now watch this, watch this. Now turn it back on.
So once we have 3 hours in my mind. If so, once we have
I've never had that happen before.
I don't think you used one of these zeros before either.
With my light in the IP.
Right. So, but you're the only one that I've seen this problem.
Why would a light affect the audio?
That light is emitting that RF emission.
We were non-committed. It's on this frequency. No.
Here's a broadband. Yeah.
You tell me which one to take.
You don't know what you're talking about. We listened to about half of what
You
he
see what it says right
but then we believe half of it.
He's imagineering.
I gotta imagine everything because nobody does it.
Did they hand those out to you guys?
Well, I thought we're down in LA.
I like your name tag, too.
Yeah, I'm an official.
You got ideas, right?
All right. So I can't do anything to help you. I'm going to go outside.
Hey, Alex, did you record that on your card?
Yeah.
Could I have the card? Because we're about to resolve that. And I'm going to give them one of the markers.